Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that sounds way fancier than it actually is. The quiet, slow journey of the French baguette to Saigon in the sticky, humid 1850s. And yeah, you might think, who cares about old bread? But trust me, once you imagine the smell of it drifting through a city full of wooden houses and muddy streets, you'll get why people lost their minds over it. Plus, if you were stuck eating plain rice every single day back then, you'd probably sell your shoes just for a crusty bite of this new thing. You'd starve to death in about 3 days, I swear. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love knowing how far this sleepy history reaches. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on a narrow wooden plank road, your sandals already damp from the evening rain. The air feels like warm soup, thick with the smell of wet earth, fish sauce, and smoke from oil lamps. You hear the creak of cartwheels rolling slowly through the mud, and then something unusual. An unfamiliar, toasty smell, almost sweet, but not quite. It doesn't belong to this place. You follow it, weaving through women selling rice porridge and men yelling over dried fish prices. The scent grows stronger, buttery and sharp, and then you see it. A small makeshift stall with a canvas roof drooping under the drizzle. Behind it, a man in a sweat-soaked white shirt, clearly not Vietnamese, is pulling long, thin loaves of something golden from a blackened clay oven. You step closer. The bread crackles as it hits the wooden counter, steam curling up like ghostly fingers. The crust glistens under the lamplight, hard, shiny, and completely alien compared to the soft rice cakes you're used to. You don't dare touch it, but you watch as a French soldier breaks one in half. The crack echoes louder than it should in a wet night, and crumbs scatter like tiny grains of sand. He bites down, grimacing slightly. Maybe it's too hard, maybe it's too hot, but he keeps chewing. And that smell, oh, that smell is making your stomach twist. Nearby, a couple of Vietnamese kids stare, wide-eyed. One whispers, "It's like a stick of wood, but you can eat it." The other laughs, "Maybe it's for horses." They're not entirely wrong. The first shipments of baguettes that arrived here were so overbaked, some people joked about using them as weapons. You edge closer to the stall, pretending you're just curious. The French baker, wiping sweat from his brow with a flour-covered hand, catches your gaze for a second. His expression says, "You don't belong here," but then he shrugs, too tired to care. The smell grows stronger as another batch comes out. Your stomach growls embarrassingly loud. The soldier glances at you and smirks before tearing off a piece and shoving it into his mouth. A woman standing nearby mutters under her breath, "Why would anyone eat wheat when we have rice?" She sounds offended, as if the bread itself is an insult to Vietnamese tradition. But you can't stop staring. The rain picks up, soft at first, then heavier, drumming on the canvas roof. The baker curses under his breath in French, his words sharp like he's blaming the sky for ruining his night. One of the loaves rolls off the counter into the mud, and a skinny stray dog darts forward, grabs it, then yelps in shock when the crust scrapes its teeth. Even dogs aren't sure what to do with this strange thing. Still, something inside you, it's not hunger exactly, but curiosity, pulls you forward. You imagine biting into it. Would it taste like the smell, rich and warm? Or would it be as bland as everyone says? A young Vietnamese boy, braver than you, steps up and points shyly. The baker hesitates, then hands him a loaf, maybe because it's easier than arguing. The boy cradles it like treasure. He takes one bite, winces at the hardness, then chews slowly, his eyes widening. And in that exact moment, under the flickering lamp, you realize something. You're witnessing the very first spark of what might one day become a completely different story. But for now, it's just bread. Hard, foreign, weird bread. The baker slaps more dough onto a wooden board. Flour drifts through the damp air like lazy snowflakes. You take a step back, the smell following you, sticking to your clothes. The night is thick, the rain is steady, and for some reason, you can't stop thinking about that bread. Some historians still argue about who baked the very first baguette in Saigon. Maybe it was this man, maybe another one miles away. But standing here with your stomach twisting and the smell curling around you, it doesn't really matter. You just know you want to taste. drop by drop until you feel like you've been swimming in your own shirt. You pull your collar tighter, though it doesn't help. Your sandals squish with every step as you wander away from that little stall, but the smell, oh, it follows you, teasing you like a bad memory. You pass by a row of houses, their windows glowing faintly behind wooden shutters. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere else, a man coughs, hacking like he's been chewing on smoke for years. But mostly, the night hums with the usual mix of frogs, vendors, and the low, distant chatter of people bargaining even after dark. And then, you overhear the two French officers standing under a dripping awning complaining loudly. "I can't eat rice every damn day," one says, his accent sharp, his voice carrying over the rain. "Back home, I had bread, real bread, cheese, butter, here, fish sauce and rice. The other nods, pulling at his damn sleeve. "I'd kill for proper flour. I swear they're importing dirt, not wheat." You slow your steps, pretending to examine a basket of wilted vegetables nearby, just to listen. It's not like you understand every word. They're speaking half in French, half in broken Vietnamese, but the tone is clear. Desperation. These men are homesick, and food is the rope tying them to whatever's left of home. You think about it. It must feel awful to crave something that doesn't exist here, like needing air in a room full of smoke. And honestly, you get it. If you were dragged halfway across the world and handed nothing but bland boiled rice, you'd start dreaming of crunchy crusts too. A passing vendor interrupts your thoughts. She's balancing a bamboo pole loaded with baskets, and she mutters something under her breath. Something about these white men and their stupid wheat. Her tone is mocking, but not cruel. More like she's laughing at their fussiness. After all, rice has fed everyone here for centuries. Why would anyone need anything else? You keep walking, turning into a darker alley where the smell of wet clay and oil lamps fills the air. Somewhere inside one of these houses, someone is talking about the same thing. Flour. You can hear it through a half-open window. A Vietnamese man, his voice low, says to another, "They pay ridiculous money for wheat. And even rats are getting fat chewing through those sacks." You almost laugh. Of course rats are winning this game. Somewhere out at sea, crates of imported flour are probably being gnawed open by squeaky little thieves. You imagine a fat rat wearing a tiny officer's hat, chewing on baguettes like it owns Saigon. But not everyone is laughing. You turn the corner and spot a tired-looking man sitting under a broken roof tile, staring at a small slip of paper. It's a French receipt for flour. You can recognize the numbers even if you don't understand the language. His face is pinched, frustrated like he's calculating how many bowls of rice that mud money could have bought instead. And you wonder, why bother? Why ship flour across oceans, fight rats, bribe port guards, all for some hard bread? Maybe it's not just hunger. Maybe it's memory. These soldiers, these settlers, they aren't just eating bread. They're eating home. The thought makes you pause under a lantern, the yellow light soft against the rain-slick street. Behind you, a drunk man stumbles past, muttering in Vietnamese, "They should just eat what we eat. Rice never betrays you." He laughs at his own joke, but you're not sure it's funny, because you've seen the look on those soldiers' faces, and it's not just fussiness. It's longing, the kind that keeps you awake at night. A cart creaks by, pulled by a weary ox. You catch sight of burlap sacks piled high, stamped with messy French words. Flour, imported from somewhere far colder than this humid city. The driver curses as the cart gets stuck in the mud, and you can almost hear the flour sighing, knowing it traveled all this way just to get dumped into ovens that barely work. The smell of that bread from earlier creeps back into your nose, faint but persistent, like it's hiding somewhere in the dark. Maybe the French were right to fight for it. Maybe you'd do the same if you were trapped in a foreign land. Some historians still argue about how desperate those first French settlers really were, whether bread was a necessity or just a spoiled habit they couldn't drop. But standing here, listening to their voices echo through the wet night, you don't need an argument. You can feel their hunger, their homesickness, as real as the rain sliding down your back. You take another step, splashing through a shallow puddle. A flash of lightning briefly lights up the sacks of flour of the ox cart. The officers huddled under the awning. All of it feels fragile, like the city itself is balancing between two worlds, one of rice, one of wheat. And for some strange reason, you can't help but wonder, What would it take to bring those two worlds together in one bite? The puddles deepen as the night stretches on, and you find yourself trailing behind that ox cart, its wooden wheels carving slow grooves into the mud. The sacks of flour sway with each bump, and every time one shifts too far, you half expect it to burst open, spilling white clouds into the street. You imagine the rats throwing a party if that happened, squeaking cheers, maybe even forming little rat choirs. The cart driver grumbles under his breath, snapping the reins lazily. The ox snorts, clearly unimpressed with its life choices. You keep a few steps behind, not because you care about the cart itself, but because you're curious. Where exactly does all this flour end up? It takes longer than you expect. The city seems to stretch alley after alley until the streets widen near the docks. The air shifts too. The thick smell of fish sauce and wet soil mixes with something sharper, salt, tar, and the sour tang of rotting ropes. The harbor is restless even at night, with sailors yelling and boats creaking as though gently against the piers. And then you see it, a French merchant ship bigger than the fishing boats around it, its dark sails drooping like tired wings. Dock workers are still unloading it under the dim lantern light. Crates, barrels, and there they are, more sacks of flour, dragged down a wooden plank one by one. You lean against a post, watching. The flour bags look bruised, patched up with rope and old cloth. Some have faint teeth marks where rats had tried their luck during the journey. A dock worker slaps one and curses as white powder puffs out of a small tear. He laughs bitterly. Rats eat better than us these days. The ship's captain, a tall man with a beard that looks like it could hide small animals, barks orders in French. You can't catch every word, but you pick up enough to know he's angry. Angry about delays, about the rain, about how half the flour is already spoiled. You imagine the flour's journey, weeks tossed across the sea, damp salt air creeping into every bag. Some historians still argue whether these early shipments were even worth it. Many claim the cost of transporting wheat was absurd compared to rice, that only stubbornness or arrogance kept the French bringing it. Others whisper that it was never about feeding soldiers at all, but about proving something, that French culture could survive anywhere, even in this steamy corner of Asia. The captain stomps past, muttering something about baguette dreams in a rice swamp, and you almost laugh. It's true, what's a fancy loaf of bread doing in a place where mud clings to everything? The cart you followed creaks to a stop near the dock. Workers begin loading more sacks onto it, their muscles straining as they haul the heavy bundles. You watch one man nearly topple over when a bag shifts unexpectedly. A small tear opens near the corner and flour spills into the mud, creating pale streaks that look almost ghostly under the lantern light. A kid, barefoot, probably someone's errand boy, squats down and pokes at the wet flour, then licks his finger out of pure curiosity. He makes a face instantly, spitting to the side. Guess raw, wet flour isn't the delicacy anyone hoped for. As the cart fills, the rain lightens just enough for you to hear the quiet crunch of boots on wet wood. You turn your head and spot a French officer, maybe in his late 20s, standing by the dock's edge. He's staring at the sacks like they're treasure, his eyes hungry, not in a literal starving way, but in that quiet, desperate way you saw earlier. He notices you watching and gives a half smile, tired and polite. Then he says something, slow enough for you to catch. Bread tastes like home. It's a simple sentence, but it sticks to you. Bread tastes like home. Maybe that's all this is about. Not arrogance, not culture wars, just homesickness packed tightly into burlap sacks. The cart finally starts moving again, creaking away from the docks toward the city. You follow almost automatically, your feet sinking slightly in the softened dirt. The smell of the sea fades with every step, replaced by the faint promise of what this flour will become once it reaches the ovens. You wonder how much of it will survive the trip through muddy streets, how much will end up in rat bellies, how much will turn into bread hard enough to crack teeth. But still, you can feel it. This is how it starts, one sack at a time, dragging its way into Saigon, carrying not just flour, but memories. A gust of wind shakes loose a bit of flour from one of the torn bags, and it drifts into the night air like lazy snow. You reach out without thinking, and a few specks land on your fingers. You rub them together, soft, fine, and strangely comforting. And for a moment, under the dim lanterns and the restless creak of the harbor. You can almost taste it. Not the bread itself, not yet, but the idea of it. The promise of something warm, golden, and foreign waiting at the end of this long, soggy road. The cart groans under its weight as it crawls back into the city, and you trail it like a curious shadow. The rain has eased to a mist now, soft enough to make the air feel thicker rather than wetter. Lanterns glow dimly along the street, smearing golden light across puddles. Every now and then, you catch the flour bags shifting, a faint puff of white dust sneaking out, dissolving instantly into the damp air. The smell changes as you move deeper into the neighborhood. The sharp scent of the docks fades, replaced by the smoky perfume of oil lamps, grilled fish, and damp wood. But somewhere in all that, you catch something faint, almost shy. The warm, toasty scent of bread. It's not strong yet, but it's there, tugging at you like a whisper. The cart finally stops in front of a squat building made of mismatched bricks, its roof patched with tin sheets and wooden planks. Smoke curls lazily from a short chimney, glowing orange at the edges where firelight licks the bricks. You found it, the heart of this strange new world, a makeshift bakery. It's smaller than you imagined. The door is nothing more than a warped piece of wood propped against the frame, and the walls look like they'd crumble if you breathed too hard. But the smell, oh, the smell is alive. You step closer, careful not to block the workers unloading flour. One curses as he nearly slips in the mud, hugging the heavy sack like it's a sleeping child. Another worker, shirtless and shiny with sweat, kicks the door open with his foot and yells something in French to whoever's inside. You peek through the doorway. The room glows orange from the oven, which looks more like a dome of clay slapped together by someone who's never built an oven before. Its surface is cracked, like black lent to blacken from too many fires, but it works. At least well enough to keep glowing embers alive. A man crouches beside it, his sleeves rolled up, face streaked with soot and flour. His hair sticks to his forehead in wet clumps, and when he turns, you recognize him. It's the same baker from earlier. The one you saw pulling loaves out into the rainy street. His shirt clings to his back, damp and spotted with flour, and his hands move with quick, practiced motions, shaping dough that doesn't quite look like the smooth French loaves you've imagined. Beside him, a younger assistant fans the oven with a woven mat, his face red from the heat. Every now and then, the fire flares too high, and they both curse in French. The floor is covered in a thin layer of flour, making footprints everywhere. You catch yourself smiling. It looks almost like snow, though the air is far too hot and heavy for that kind of magic. You shift closer to the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame. The heat hits you immediately, washing over your damp clothes and making them stick uncomfortably to your skin. But you don't move away, because the smell is stronger here. The baker slaps a piece of dough onto a board, shaping it quickly. You notice something. His loaves aren't perfect. Some are too fat, others too thin, and a few are downright lopsided. You wonder if this is because the flour has been sitting too long on the docks, maybe damp from the sea air. Still, he works with determination, muttering under his breath. He glances at the oven's temperature, tests the dough's elasticity, and for a second, you see it. This isn't just a job to him. It's almost defiance. Some historians still argue whether these early French bakers in Saigon were true artisans or just desperate men clinging to habit. But standing here, watching the sweat bead on his nose as he shapes another imperfect loaf, you feel like it's something else entirely. Stubborn pride. The assistant drops a loaf too close to the fire and the crust burns instantly, filling the air with a bitter, acrid smell. The baker groans, smacks the boy lightly on the shoulder, and tosses the ruined bread into a basket. You peek at it. It's blackened on one side, still golden on the other, almost edible if you ignored the char. The boy mutters something in Vietnamese, too quiet for the baker to catch. You hear it though. It still smells better than rice. And the baker keeps working, oblivious, his hands a blur of muscle memory. You wonder if he even tastes his own bread anymore, or if he's too tired to care. A sudden hiss makes you jump. The assistant throws a bit of water into the oven, and steam rushes out, curling around the room like ghostly fingers. You step back instinctively, bumping into a flour sack stacked by the door. A little cloud of white puffs into the air, settling onto your hair and shoulders. You brush it off, laughing softly to yourself. If If someone looked at you right now, you'd probably look like one of those workers, tired, messy, and covered in flour. The baker glances up at you briefly, his eyes flicking to your flour-dusted sleeves. He smirks just for a second before going back to his dough. You take a breath, letting the smell fill your lungs. It's different from rice. It's richer, heavier, like it's pulling you towards something unknown. A loaf is pulled from the oven, and you hear the crust crack as the baker sets it on the counter. The sound is sharp, satisfying, almost like the bread is sighing after surviving the fire. You can't help staring. The crust glows in the lamplight, blistered and uneven, but beautiful in its own way. And just like that, you realize you're standing at the edge of something new. Not a revolution, not yet. Just a small, smoky room where bricks crack under heat and stubborn hands refuse to give up. But it's a beginning. You step away from the doorway as another loaf is pulled from the fire, its scent clinging to you like a secret. And as you walk back into the damp, quiet street, you can still hear it. The faint crackle of bread cooling, whispering stories you don't yet understand. The street outside feels cooler now, though it's probably just because you stepped away from that oven's furnace heat. You wipe your hands on your damp shirt, smearing flour streaks into the already messy fabric. The air carries the same mix of wet earth, smoke, and something else now. Faint, but growing. That smell. Bread. It's sneaking through alleys, sliding between houses, and curling around street corners like gossip. You follow it, because how could you not? Your sandals squish through shallow puddles as you make your way past shuttered market stalls. The lanterns, hanging from crooked poles, sway gently, their light dancing across the slick ground. And then you notice them. People. Locals. Not French officers or dock workers, just ordinary Vietnamese men and women pausing in the street, sniffing the air like curious cats. A woman carrying a basket of leafy greens stops right in front of you, her head tilting slightly as she breathes in. "What's that?" she murmurs, mostly to herself. Her little daughter, no more than 6, wrinkles her nose and whispers, "It smells like burnt rice." A man standing nearby laughs. Maybe it's medicine or poison. Those French eat strange things. His tone is teasing, but you can see his eyes dart toward the smell, lingering longer than his words suggest. The scent grows stronger as you move deeper into the alley. You're not the only one following it. 2 teenage boys trail behind you, trying to act casual, kicking a stone between them as if they're just wandering. But every few steps, one of them tilts his head slightly, sniffing. You turn another corner and find yourself facing a small open area where a group of people have gathered. They stand in a loose half circle, not daring to get too close to the source. A wooden cart with a tray of fresh loaves. The baker's assistant you saw earlier is there, holding one up, steam still rising from its crust. Nobody moves to buy one, they just stare. A brave old man finally steps closer, squinting at the loaf. It's just wheat, right, like porridge. His voice wavers between curiosity and suspicion. The assistant nods, his Vietnamese clumsy but understandable. Wheat. Eat with meat, maybe. A murmur ripples through the small crowd. Wheat. Meat. 2 luxuries in one sentence. You catch someone whispering, "How much?" The assistant raises 2 fingers, mutters a number that makes several people scoff. It's expensive. Almost offensively so. Why eat that when rice is cheap? A woman mutters, clutching her basket tighter. But despite their words, none of them leave. They keep staring, eyes fixed on the bread like it's a street performer doing tricks. The assistant may be feeling awkward, tears off a small piece of crust and offers it to the old man. After a moment's hesitation, the man takes it, holds it up to his nose, and sniffs. He bites, slowly, carefully. The crowd leans in just a little like they're all chewing with him. The old man chews for a long moment, then swallows, his face unreadable. Finally, he shrugs. Hard. Like wood. But he licks his lips, surprised. Smells good. Tastes different. Different. That word lingers in the air like smoke. The little boy standing beside his mother tugs at her sleeve. "Can we get one?" Then he whispers, almost shyly. The mother shushes him, but she doesn't look away from the loaves either. You edge closer, catching the faint crackle of the crust as steam escapes tiny cracks. The smell is stronger here, making your stomach twist with a quiet, unfamiliar hunger. The assistant seems encouraged. He tears off another piece and offers it to a young woman who pretends not to care but takes it anyway. She chews cautiously, then hides a tiny smile behind her hand. Someone in the back laughs. You'll break your teeth on that thing. But he's still watching. And then it happens. A small, almost invisible shift. One man steps forward and hands over coins. Then another. Slowly, awkwardly, people begin buying loaves. They hold them gingerly like they're carrying hot stones, unsure what to do next. One woman tries to bite directly into hers and grimaces instantly, pulling back with an exaggerated oof. The crowd laughs, the tension breaking. The boy, maybe 10 years old, tears off a chunk and hands it to his friend. They chew together, exchanging a glance that says, "It's weird, but not bad." The smell spreads further as more loaves are broken, steam curling into the cool air. You watch it all, fascinated. Some historians still argue about when exactly the Vietnamese started warming up to French bread, whether it took years or just a few curious bites. But standing here in this damp little square, you can see it happening. Not love at first sight, but the beginning of something. The old man who tasted first finishes his piece and chuckles softly. "Still prefer rice," he says, almost defensively. But then he buys another loaf. The crowd laughs again, softer this time, the sound mingling with the crackling of cooling bread. You stand there smiling without meaning to, because you can feel it too. This strange little moment where curiosity outweighs tradition, if only for a night. And as you turn to leave, the smell follows you, drifting lazily through the rain-washed streets, like a quiet promise of what's to come. The rain returns, not heavy this time, just a fine mist that beads on your eyelashes and turns the streets slick again. You tug your damp shirt closer, even though it doesn't help. The smell of bread still lingers faintly behind you, but here, deeper in the quieter alleys, it fades into the usual city scents. Wet wood, boiled herbs, and the sharp tang of fish sauce drifting from someone's dinner pot. You keep walking anyway, curiosity pulling you like an invisible string. Around the corner you find something unexpected. A group of men sitting on overturned baskets under a sagging tarp, talking animatedly. And there it is, holding loaves of bread. They're not eating them, not properly. One man bangs his loaf against the wooden crate beside him, grinning as it makes a hollow thunk. Another laughs so hard he almost chokes on his own spit. "It's like stone," he wheezes. "If the French ever run out of guns, they can throw these at people." The others roar with laughter, tapping their loaves on the ground like drumsticks. You can't help smiling, even as you feel a little bad for the bread. But, honestly, they're not wrong. These loaves look tough, their crusts thick and uneven, as if baked with more stubbornness than skill. Finally, one man takes a bite, tearing at the bread with a grunt. The crust cracks loudly, crumbs flying, and he chews with exaggerated effort, rolling his eyes dramatically. The group laughs again. "Still better than army rations," another man says, his voice softening just a little as he chews. "Not bad once you get past the crust." The laughter fades to low murmurs as they keep eating, breaking off pieces and passing them around. They chew slowly, testing this new food like it might suddenly bite them back. Across the alley, a woman leans against a doorway, arms crossed, watching. "Waste of money," she mutters under her breath, but you notice she's staring at the bread longer than she should. One of the men catches her look. "Want some?" he teases, waving a torn piece at her. She shakes her head quickly, cheeks coloring, but her eyes linger just a second too long. A young boy sitting nearby can't resist. He crawls closer, hands outstretched, and the man laughs, handing him a piece. The boy takes it like it's gold, sniffing first, then biting carefully. His face twists at the hardness, but then, just like that, his expression softens into something almost like delight. You watch quietly, taking it all in. Some historians still argue whether these first impressions, jokes about hardness, complaints about cost, delayed the spread of bread in Saigon. But watching this scene, you think it wasn't rejection, just adjustment. People were curious. They teased because it was new, not because they hated it. One man finishes his chunk and sighs, wiping crumbs from his chin. "Maybe it's better with soup," he muses aloud, "or dipped in something." The others nod thoughtfully, and you can almost see the gears turning in their heads. Little sparks of experimentation already forming. The tarp above them flaps as the wind picks up and rain begins to drip through small holes. One man tucks his loaf into his shirt to protect it, laughing as he does. "This thing better be worth the money," he jokes, but he holds it carefully like it already is. The boy gnaws happily on his piece, breadcrumbs sticking to his wet cheeks. He glances at you for a second, then grins, toothy and unbothered, before going back to chewing with determined little bites. You take a step back, letting the rain bead on your shoulders, and smile, because even though they're still laughing, still calling it stone bread, they're eating and liking it even if they won't admit it yet. You turn away, walking deeper into the alley as the sound of their laughter fades behind you. The rain thickens again, soft drumming on the tin roofs, and for a moment all you can hear is the rhythmic crunch of wet gravel under your sandals. But in your head, you can still hear that crust cracking, that sharp, satisfying sound, and somehow, you know you're going to hear it again, louder, in more places soon. The rain eases into a lazy drizzle by the time you reach the heart of the market district. Even in this damp, late hour, the place hums with life. Lanterns flicker over rows of wooden stalls, their colors dulled by the mist, and puddles mirror everything upside down. Fish piled high on bamboo trays, baskets of wet greens, and tired vendors huddled under patched cloth canopies. But tonight, something feels different. You can sense it in the way people cluster closer to one corner of the market, their voices hushed as if they're watching something unusual. You follow the murmurs until you find it. There, at the edge of the market square, a single stall glows warmer than the rest. A woven mat roof sags under the weight of rainwater, but underneath, neat rows of golden loaves rest on a low wooden table. A French soldier leans lazily against the post beside it, arms crossed, while a stout Vietnamese man counts coins nervously. You blink, surprised. Bread, right here in the market. Until now, you've only seen it in French hands or shady alleys, but here, among fish sauce and vegetables, it feels wrong, or maybe just strange. The stout man slides a small stack of coins toward the French vendor, who shrugs, disinterested, as he hands over 2 loaves. The man cradles them in his arms like they're newborn chicks, tucking them under his shirt to keep the rain off. And then you notice the whispers. Too expensive, a woman hisses to her friend. 2 loaves cost as much as a whole chicken. The friend replies, shaking her head. Still, neither of them leaves. Their eyes follow the bread all the way until it disappears into the crowd. The vendor adjusts his stock, pulling another loaf forward, and that's when you catch a closer look. The bread is rough, its crust uneven and chipped, but in the warm lantern light it looks almost royal, like gold bars for the stomach. A thin man in a conical hat steps forward, fumbling nervously with his money. He hesitates for a long moment, glancing at the bread, then at his coins, like he's deciding whether to feed his belly or his curiosity. Finally, he hands them over. The vendor smirks faintly, mutters something in French you can't fully catch, but you pick out the tone. Amusement, maybe even mild contempt. The thin man ignores it, takes his loaf and bites into it right there. The crust cracks loudly, making a few nearby vendors look up from their stalls. His jaw works slowly, chewing, and for a second his expression is unreadable. Then he swallows, his eyebrows lifting just slightly. Not bad, he says to no one in particular. That's all it takes. The 2 women from before exchange quick glances, and one of them steps forward, fishing coins from her sleeve pocket. Then another man follows. Then a boy tugging at his mother's hand. The vendor's smirk grows as he counts coins, one hand lazily shooing away the rain dripping from the roof. He doesn't even have to advertise. The smell does all the work, curling through the air, slipping under other stalls, mixing shamelessly with the scent of grilled pork and wet bamboo. You watch as a young couple sits cross-legged nearby, sharing a single loaf. The woman laughs after her first bite, holding her jaw dramatically like it hurts. But she takes another anyway. A rice vendor in the corner mutters, "Fools, wasting money on foreign food." But he keeps glancing over it every few seconds, his fingers twitching as if they want to reach for his own coin purse. Some historians still debate whether these early market sales were genuine demand or just novelty seeking. People buying bread because it was foreign, not because they loved it. But here, watching faces shift from skepticism to small secret smiles, you know it's more than that. The French soldier yawns, uninterested, but you catch the tiniest flicker of satisfaction in his eyes as he watches another loaf leave the table. Maybe he doesn't care about the money. Maybe it's about something deeper, a little victory. Proof that his culture, his home, can sneak its way even into a muddy Saigon market. The rain drips harder from the edges of the tarp, pattering into the puddles below. You take a step back, letting someone else move forward to buy. The market hums around you, but now, somewhere in that mix of fish sauce and wet herbs, there's another sound. Soft cracks of crust breaking, laughter mixed with quiet surprise, and the faint smell of something foreign, weaving its way into the city's heart. You turn away slowly, smiling to yourself, because tonight, in a place where rice still rules every meal, wheat just bought itself a tiny seat at the table. The drizzle softens into a misty haze as you leave the market behind, weaving through narrow lanes, slick with rainwater. The smell of bread fades behind you, replaced once again by the familiar perfume of the city. Steamed rice, pickled vegetables, and the faint metallic tang of wet tin roofs. But something new drifts in with the damp air, a different scent, one that doesn't belong in fancy market stalls or French ovens. It's weaker, almost hidden under the heavier smells of cooking fires and muddy streets, but you recognize it instantly. Bread. You follow it, curiosity tugging at your feet, until you turn into a cramped alley lit by a single flickering oil lamp. There, crouched under a dripping bamboo awning, is a woman with a basket. She's older, with a face carved by years of sun and hard work, her hair tied back with a faded scarf. The basket in front of her is lined with old cloth, and on it sit loaves, not the shiny golden ones from the French stalls, but slightly dented, uneven ones, their crusts cracked and dulled from sitting too long. She glances up at you warily, as if you might chase her off. But when she realizes you're just staring, her shoulders relax a little. You look at the loaves again, noticing how some have been cut unevenly, as if she'd split bigger ones into halves to make them cheaper. One is chipped on the edge, revealing the pale, spongy inside. And that's when you understand these are leftovers, yesterday's bread. A man squats across from her, inspecting a loaf like it might bite him. It's stale, he says flatly. The woman shrugs, her voice slow and practical. Cheaper than rice, fills the belly. The man hesitates, glances at his small son beside him, then finally hands over a few coins. She wraps the loaf in an old piece of newspaper and hands it over without ceremony. The boy clutches it with both hands, taking a bite right away. The crust barely cracks. It's softened by the humidity, but he chews determinedly, his cheeks puffing as he works through the dense bread. You crouch slightly, pretending to adjust your sandals so you can listen. Another woman approaches, this one younger, balancing a basket of wet laundry on her hip. She eyes the bread skeptically. You're selling scraps, she says bluntly. The older woman doesn't argue. Better than nothing. Rice is expensive this week. The younger woman hesitates, clearly torn between pride and practicality. Finally, she sighs and points to a half loaf. One. The vendor nods, her face unreadable. You notice how her hands move quickly, businesslike. But there's something else behind her eyes, something almost defiant. Because what she's doing isn't just about money, it's about making this strange, foreign food accessible, even if it's stale, even if it's looked down upon. Some historians still debate who first brought bread into the hands of ordinary Vietnamese people, whether it was through military rations, cheap market stalls, or bold vendors like her. But watching her now, you can feel it. She's part of the shift, whether she knows it or not. A group of children wander past, sniffing curiously. One points and whispers, "It smells funny." Another giggles, "Looks like a rock." But when the first boy's father tears off a piece and hands it to him, he eats it anyway, chewing thoughtfully before shrugging. Tastes okay. The older woman allows herself the tiniest smile just for a second before adjusting her basket cloth again. The drizzle picks up slightly, tapping softly on the awning. You watch as a few more people approach, cautious, quiet, some embarrassed to be seen buying leftover bread. But they buy anyway. You take a step back into the shadows, not wanting to disturb her rhythm. The lamp flickers, casting a warm glow over the little stall. The bread might be stale, cracked, even laughed at, but here in this narrow alley it's becoming something else. Practical, normal. And as you walk away, you can still hear the soft crunch of children chewing, mixing with the rain's steady whisper. A small sound maybe, but one that feels like the beginning of something bigger. The alley fades behind you, swallowed by the soft curtain of rain. You keep moving, sandals slipping slightly in the mud as you head toward a quieter street. The city feels hushed tonight, like it's holding its breath, but the smell of cooking fires drifts lazily through the mist, guiding you forward. Somewhere nearby, a clay clinks against stone, followed by the soft sizzle of oil meeting something wet. Your stomach growls before you even see it. You turn a corner, and there it is. A low wooden house with its door flung open, warm lights spilling onto the wet ground. A family sits cross-legged inside, gathered around a steaming clay pot. The rich, savory smell hits you immediately. Kakoto, fish braised slowly in sweetened fish sauce, the scent thick and mouth-watering. But then you notice something else. On the woven mat beside the pot sits an object that doesn't belong in this picture. A loaf of bread. It's not perfect. Its crust is dented, slightly soggy from the humidity, but it's definitely there, leaning against the bowl like it's trying to join the meal. You crouch a little closer, pretending to check your sandal again. Inside, a teenage boy tears off a piece of the bread, hesitates, then dips it directly into the bubbling fish sauce. His mother watches him, half amused, half disapproving. "Eat it with rice," she says, shaking her head. The boy grins, ignoring her. He lifts the dripping bread to his mouth and takes a bite. His jaw works slowly, the crust cracking softly under his teeth, and then his eyes widen. It's good. He mumbles through a full mouth, soaks up the sauce better than rice. The father snorts. Better than rice? Nothing's better than rice. But you notice he's already watching the boy dip another piece. The mother sighs, muttering something under her breath, but curiosity gets the better of her. She tears off a small piece for herself, dunks it in the thick caramel-colored sauce, and bites. For a second, her face stays neutral. Then her eyebrows lift just slightly. She doesn't say anything else, but she doesn't reach for rice either. The father gives in next, reaching over with a grunt. "Just to see why you're all acting like fools," he says. But when he takes his first bite, his eyes flick toward the loaf again, betraying him completely. You smile to yourself, watching the scene unfold like a quiet little rebellion against tradition. Some historians still debate when exactly the Vietnamese began experimenting with bread, turning it into something beyond just a French novelty. But here, in this simple house, you're watching it happen in real time. No fancy ovens, no foreign spices, just a loaf of stale bread, a pot of braised fish, and a family discovering something new by accident. The teenage boy laughs, tearing off another piece. "Rice doesn't do this," he says, holding up the soaked bread, dark with sauce. Then drinks it up. The mother swats at him lightly, pretending to scold, but she's already reaching for more herself. The father chews slowly, his pride warring with his taste buds. "Still, rice is better," he mutters, though he doesn't stop eating the bread. The youngest child, a little girl with big, curious eyes, stretches her tiny hand toward the loaf. The teenage boy rips off a small piece and hands it to her. She dips it clumsily, sauce dripping onto her fingers, and takes a bite. Her face lights up instantly. She giggles, her mouth full, and the sound mixes with the soft crackle of the fire and the quiet bubbling of the clay pot. You lean against the wall outside, feeling oddly content, because tonight, in this small wooden house with its smoky walls and steaming pot of fish, something subtle is changing. Bread is no longer just foreign, it's becoming part of a meal, a small experiment that might stick. As you turn to leave, the boy's laughter follows you into the misty street. And for the first time, you imagine a future where this scene isn't unusual at all, where dipping bread into fish sauce might be as normal as steaming rice. The mist hangs heavier now, beating on your eyelashes as you follow the narrow path back toward the busier part of the city. The rain's rhythm has softened into a distant murmur, like a lullaby for the streets. Somewhere, a dog barks lazily, then gives up halfway, curling back into whatever dry corner it's claimed. You keep walking, guided by a faint, warm glow spilling out from a small shack ahead. The smell catches you before the sight does. Baked bread again, but this time mingled with something softer, almost sweet. When you reach the doorway, you pause, peeking inside. The heat hits you instantly, thick and comforting, like stepping into a kitchen you didn't know you missed. And there he is, the French baker. The same man you saw before, sleeves rolled up, hair sticking to his forehead with sweat, face dusted with flour. His hands move quickly, folding and stretching dough with the kind of focus that shuts out everything else. But he's not alone this time. Across the wooden counter stands a young Vietnamese man, barely in his 20s, his posture stiff and awkward. His hands hover nervously over a fingers, like a stubborn, sticky creature. The baker groans dramatically, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like a curse, then grabs the young man's hands, adjusting his grip. He guides him slowly, showing how to press gently, fold, and turn. You watch the younger man's face as he tries again, tongue poking slightly out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. His movements are stiff, but after a few tries, the dough starts to take shape. Uneven, yes, but closer to what it should be. The baker steps back, arms crossed, pretending to look unimpressed, though you catch the tiniest flicker of approval in his tired eyes. The younger man glances up, hopeful. Good, he asks in broken French. The baker grunts, which you're pretty sure is his version of yes. Some historians still argue whether the French willingly taught Vietnamese bakers or if knowledge was stolen, learned quietly through observation. But standing here, watching flour-dusted hands move in cautious harmony, you feel like the truth was probably both necessity mixed with curiosity. The oven crackles loudly as the assistant boy, yes, the same one who nearly burned a loaf earlier, fans the flames. The heat makes the air shimmer and sweat beads on both men's foreheads. The young Vietnamese man tries shaping the dough into a loaf, and it comes out lopsided. He grimaces, clearly embarrassed, but the baker only shrugs, mutters something that sounds almost like encouragement, and tosses the misshapen loaf toward the oven. The assistant catches it clumsily, laughing, and slides it onto the baking stone. The smell in the room deepens, rich and warm. You close your eyes for a second, breathing it in. It's not perfect bread, maybe too dense, maybe too uneven, but it smells like determination. The younger man wipes his forehead with his sleeve, leaving a streak of flour on his cheek. He looks at the baker again, waiting for another instruction. The baker sighs, gestures to the dough, and mutters something that even you can understand without knowing the language. Again, the young man nods firmly, presses his palms to the dough once more. This time, his movements are smoother, less panicked, almost rhythmic. And as you watch him, you realize something. This isn't just about bread anymore. It's about learning, about passing something down, even if neither of them fully understands how important this moment might be. The baker glances at the oven, mutters a quiet warning to the assistant, and then steps over to adjust the fire himself. The young man keeps kneading, his hands more confident now, almost proud. A faint crack comes from the oven as a loaf finishes baking, its crust splitting gently under the heat. The assistant pulls it out, steam curling upward like ghostly ribbons. The smell is intoxicating, filling every corner of the room, clinging to your clothes, your hair, and, as your very thoughts. The baker sets the loaf on the counter, taps it lightly, and the crust responds with a sharp, satisfying sound. He looks at the younger man, then slides the loaf toward him. The young man blinks, startled, then picks it up with both hands. His fingers press lightly against the crust, feeling the heat, the weight. He doesn't speak, but his expression says everything. This is more than just bread. You take a slow step back from the doorway, the act letting the moment belong to them. Because tonight, in this smoky little room with its cracked oven and flour-dusted air, something bigger is happening than either of them probably realizes. And as you slip back into the misty street, the smell of fresh bread follows you, lingering like a quiet promise. The mist clings to your clothes as you wander farther into the narrow streets, still carrying the scent of fresh bread on your skin. But soon that warm, toasty smell begins to mix with something sharper, salty, tangy, unmistakable, fish sauce. It drifts toward you in thick waves until you find yourself standing near a row of wooden houses, their walls darkened by years of smoke and rain. A woman crouches in front of one, her hands busy with a mortar and pestle, grinding garlic and chili into a bright red paste. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat against the quiet night. And then you see it. On the low bamboo table beside her sits half a loaf of bread, its crust torn, one corner stained dark with something wet. You step closer, curious, and catch the moment it happens. Her elbow nudges the edge of the bowl, sending a tiny splash of fish sauce spilling across the table. It drips onto the bread, soaking into the rough crust. The woman curses under her breath, reaching for a rag, but then she pauses. She looks at the wet patch thoughtfully, her brow furrowing. For a long moment, she just stares at it, and then curiosity wins. She tears off the soaked corner, lifts it to her nose, and sniffs. Her face twists, uncertain, but she takes a small bite anyway. Her eyes widen immediately. She doesn't say anything, but her expression softens into something close to surprise. A young boy sitting beside her watches closely. Is it bad? He asks, tilting his head. The woman chews slowly, then swallows. No, she says finally, almost reluctantly. Not bad at all. The boy grins and reaches for a piece of bread himself, but she swats his hand away, pretending to scold. Still, you notice she tears off another small piece, dips it deliberately into the fish sauce bowl, and pops it into her mouth. The boy waits impatiently, then sneaks a piece when she's not looking, dunking it clumsily. He bites, and his face lights up. It's good, he blurts, grinning. The woman sighs, shaking her head as if trying to stay annoyed, but she doesn't take the bowl away. Across the narrow street, a neighbor peeks out from her doorway, curious. What are you doing? She calls. The woman hesitates for only a second. Trying something, she replies, dipping another piece. The neighbor laughs. Bread with fish sauce, the French would faint. Let them faint, the woman mutters, taking another bite. You hide a smile watching this tiny rebellion unfold. Some historians still argue whether the pairing of bread and fish sauce was intentional or just an accident born of spilled bowls and stubborn curiosity. But standing here, you know accidents sometimes taste better than careful planning. The neighbor steps out, crossing the narrow lane to crouch beside her. Let me try, she says, holding out her hand. The woman hands her a piece, and the neighbor dips it generously before biting. Her eyebrows rise in surprise, and she chuckles. Maybe the French were right about some things. The woman smirks. They don't eat it like this. The boy, emboldened, dips another piece and waves it around proudly. This is ours now, he announces, and both women laugh. The night hums softly around you, the faint splash of water dripping from rooftops, the quiet clink of someone washing dishes nearby. But here, on this small bamboo table, something new is taking shape. The women keep dipping bread into fish sauce, experimenting with how long to soak it, laughing at the drips running down their fingers. It's messy, imperfect, but it's theirs. You take a step back, not wanting to intrude, but the smell lingers. Fish sauce sharp and salty, blending with the warm, toasty scent of bread. It's a strange mix, almost wrong, but somehow it works. And as you walk away, you can still hear their laughter, soft and genuine, carried gently by the misty night air. A small sound, but one that feels like the start of something much bigger than just an accidental spill. The rain has faded into nothing more than a cool dampness clinging to the air. The streets glisten under scattered lantern light, and the city feels quieter now, as if even the frogs have decided to take a break. You walk slowly, the smell of bread and fish sauce still ghosting your senses when you turn onto a slightly wider road. There, under a crooked wooden awning, you see something unusual. A small gathering of French women, their dresses bunched awkwardly to avoid the wet ground, fans fluttering lazily even though the air is thick and unmoving. They're standing near a basket of loaves, gossiping loudly, their voices sharp and animated. A young Vietnamese servant crouches nearby, holding the basket for them, his expression blank as he stares at the ground. One of the women, her hair piled high and shimmering slightly under the lantern light, holds a loaf like it's a piece of fine porcelain. Regardez, she says, shaking her head, her tone full of disdain. They're ruining it. The others murmur agreement. You slow your steps, pretending to inspect a puddle while you listen. They dip it in fish sauce, another woman says, her nose wrinkling. Fish sauce, can you imagine? The first woman fans herself dramatically, as though even hearing it might give her some kind of disease. It's barbaric. Bread is meant for butter, for pâté, for museum. Not this. The servant's eyes flicker for just a second at her words, but he keeps his head low. One of the younger women, clearly newer to Saigon, laughs nervously. But they seem to like it. Maybe it's not so bad. The older woman gives her a look that could cut glass. Liking it isn't the point. Bread is French. It's supposed to be eaten the French way. If they change it, it's no longer bread. The servant shifts slightly, his grip tightening on the basket handle, but he says nothing. The women continue, their words spilling out like sharp little knives, picking apart every story they've heard of locals eating bread with herbs, dipping it in sauce, even stuffing it with meat. To them, it's sacrilege. Some historians still argue about whether French settlers encouraged or resisted Vietnamese reinterpretations of bread. But standing here, you can feel the tension clearly. For these women, bread isn't just food, it's identity, culture, pride. The younger woman tries again, softer this time. Maybe it will taste better their way. The older one gasps as if she's been slapped. Better, impossible. They don't understand bread. They don't respect it. The servant glances up at that just for a heartbeat, and you catch the faintest flicker of a smirk tugging at his lips before he quickly looks down again, because maybe he's thinking what you are. They do understand bread, just differently. The women eventually tire of their complaints, each buying a loaf before stepping carefully back into the street, skirts lifted high to avoid puddles. Their voices fade into the night, leaving the servant standing alone with the basket. He lets out a small sigh, shifting the basket to his hip, and for the first time since you've been watching, he takes a piece of bread for himself. Just a small one, torn from a chipped loaf. He glances around quickly, then dips it into a small clay jar hanging from his belt. Fish sauce. He bites, chews slowly, and a quiet smile spreads across his face. You turn away, hiding your grin because you don't need to taste it to know. He's thinking the same thing everyone else is starting to realize. Maybe bread isn't just French anymore. As you walk off, the soft sound of his quiet chewing fades behind you, blending with the distant hum of the city. And somewhere in that silence, you feel it a shift, small but steady, like the first crack in an old wall. The night stretches long and damp as you follow the faint sound of wheels creaking through the slick streets. The air smells of wet wood and smoke, mixed with something dry and dusty. Flour, maybe, or old bread. Then you see it, a wooden Seikeo, a two-wheeled handcart pulled by men with shoulders broad enough to make the cart look almost delicate behind him. But there's nothing delicate about what it carries. Stacked high, wrapped loosely in burlap, are loaves of bread, long, uneven, and jostling with every bump in the muddy road. Each time the cart hits a rut, a loaf bounces slightly, threatening to tumble out. The man grunts with each step, his bare feet splashing through shallow puddles. His face glistens with sweat, strands of hair plastered to his forehead. He pulls with the slow determination of someone who has done this 100 times already, maybe more. You follow quietly, staying to the side as the cart creaks down the uneven road. Every now and then a loaf slips closer to the edge, and the man reaches back with one hand to shove it back into place without even looking. And it happens. One loaf rolls right off the top, landing with a soft thud in the wet dirt. The man curses under his breath, stopping just long enough to pick it up. He wipes it on his shirt, leaving a dark streak of mud smeared across the crust, then tosses it back onto the pile. No one will care. Bread is still too rare to waste, even if it's kissed by the street. The boy darts out from a nearby doorway, eyes wide. "Where are you taking them?" he asks, curiosity bright in his voice. The man doesn't stop pulling. "Hotel," he says shortly, breathless, "for French officers." The boy frowns, staring at the wobbling stack of bread as it disappears into the mist. You can almost hear his thoughts. Why do they get all of it? You keep following as the cart turns onto a wider street, its wheels creaking louder against the cobblestones. A dog trots beside it for a few steps, sniffing at the burlap before losing interest. Some historians still argue whether these early bread deliveries ever reached ordinary Vietnamese households, or were reserved strictly for soldiers and rich colonists. But watching this cart now, heavy and slow under the weight of wheat, you know the answer. At least for now, this bread isn't meant for everyone. The man pulls harder as the road inclines slightly, his feet slipping in the mud. The loaf bounces off again, this time rolling farther into the dirt. He hesitates for half a second before scooping it up and tossing it into a separate corner of the cart, maybe for himself later, or maybe for someone who can't afford a clean loaf. The cart keeps moving, turning past a row of houses where people peek from their windows, but their eyes following the bread like cats tracking a bird. No one reaches out to take one, but you can feel their quiet hunger hanging in the air. As you walk alongside, a light drizzle begins again, pattering softly on the loaves. The burlap grows darker as it soaks, but the man doesn't stop. He just keeps pulling, each step steady, relentless. And then as the cart disappears into the glowing street ahead, you realize something. This is more than just a delivery. It's a slow, creaking river of change dragging wheat through the heart of a rice-fed city, one muddy wheel turn at a time. The drizzle thickens, and you pause, watching the cart grow smaller in the mist. One loaf slips slightly toward the edge again, wobbling precariously with each bump, like it's trying to escape. You almost laugh to yourself because somehow you'll feel like that loaf understands something. Sooner or later, it's going to fall into the right hands. And maybe that's exactly how change begins. The drizzle has turned to a steady curtain of rain by the time you make your way through another winding street. Water runs in thin rivulets along the edges of the path, carrying bits of leaves and dirt toward deeper puddles. The night smells clean now, washed of dust and smoke, but the faint aroma of baked bread still lingers in the damp air, stubborn and warm against the cold wetness. You stop under the wooden awning of a small tea stall, shaking the rain from your sleeves when a sound catches your attention. Not words, not laughter, just a quiet rhythmic crackling. You follow it to a tiny stall tucked against the side of a house. Its walls are patched with mismatched planks, and smoke curls lazily from a clay chimney. Inside, a single lantern casts a warm glow over a small round oven, its surface blackened from years of fire. And then you smell it. Bread. Fresh. Hot. Still breathing steam into the air. The baker, a thin man with sharp cheekbones and hands dusted in flour, leans over the oven, pulling a loaf out with a pair of long wooden paddles. He places it on a tray, and the crust crackles immediately under the cooler air. The sound is soft but sharp enough to slice through the steady drumming of rain. You step closer, drawn in by the smell and the warm orange glow spilling onto the wet ground. The baker glances up briefly but doesn't seem surprised. Maybe he's used to people staring. A young woman sits nearby, huddled under the awning, cradling a small boy in her lap. She looks cold, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks, but her eyes never leave the tray of bread. The boy shifts restlessly, staring at the loaf as if he's never seen anything like it before. The baker slides another loaf out of the oven, setting it next to the first. This one crackles too, louder this time, and a faint trail of steam curls upward, glowing in the lantern light like thin, ghostly ribbons. The woman hesitates, digging into the folds of her wet sleeve to pull out a small pouch of coins. She counts them slowly, biting her lip as if weighing whether this is worth it. Finally, she stands, stepping forward. "1," she says quietly. The baker nods, choosing the smaller loaf and wrapping it in a scrap of old newspaper before handing it to her. She takes it carefully, almost reverently, like it's something fragile. The boy squirms excitedly in her arms, reaching for it. She tears off a small piece and blows on it before giving it to him. His little teeth sink into the crust with effort, and then his eyes widen as the warmth hits his tongue. He chews slowly, seriously, as if committing the taste to memory. The woman watches him with a faint smile, then takes a bite herself. Her shoulders relax slightly, and for a moment, the cold rain and the long night seem to disappear for her. You lean against the wooden post, watching the steam curl from the rest of the loaves. There's something almost comforting about this small scene, a glowing oven, quiet rain, and a family sharing warm bread in the middle of a wet Saigon night. Some historians still argue about when bread stopped being just a foreign luxury and started becoming something people sought for comfort. But watching the boy's face soften into a sleepy smile as he chews, you think maybe this is the moment, right here, repeated 100 different ways across the city. The baker pulls another loaf from the oven, its crust darker than the others, almost burnt. He frowns, taps it gently, listening to the hollow sound. Then, with a shrug, he sets it aside on a separate tray. Maybe for himself, maybe for someone who doesn't care about perfect crusts. The woman finishes paying, tucking the wrapped loaf under her arm as she turns to leave. The boy clings to her shoulder, chewing his last piece slowly, as if he doesn't want it to end. You step back into the rain as they disappear into the misty street, their small lantern bobbing in the darkness. The soft crackling sound follows you as you walk away, blending with the rain's steady rhythm, warmth against cold. A quiet reminder that sometimes comfort isn't a feast, it's just one warm loaf shared on a rainy night. The rain has slowed to a fine mist, the kind that doesn't quite fall but hangs in the air, clinging to your skin like breath. The streets glisten, reflecting broken streaks of lantern light as you make your way deeper into the quieter parts of the city. Somewhere, a dog shakes itself dry, sending tiny droplets scattering into the night, and then you hear it. A rhythmic thump, slap, fold, the unmistakable sound of dough meeting wood. You follow it to a low, open front shop where warm light spills out across the slick street. Inside, a young Vietnamese man stands at a battered wooden table, his hands pressing, folding, and stretching dough with slow, determined motions. His hair is damp, either from sweat or mist, or both, and his sleeves are rolled high, revealing arms dusted with flour. It takes you a second to recognize him. The same boy from before, the one who clumsily learned under the French baker's watchful eye. But tonight, he's alone. You step closer, leaning just enough to watch without disturbing him. His movements are careful, almost reverent, as if every fold of dough is a secret he's still afraid of ruining. But there's pride in the way his hands move now. Hesitant, yes, but steady. A small clay lamp flickers on the corner of the table, its flame bending slightly whenever he slaps the dough too hard. Each sound, thump, slap, fold, echoes in the tiny shop, rhythmic and soothing and like the heartbeat of something new being born. He pauses for a moment, wiping his brow with the back of his arm, leaving a streak of flour across his temple. His eyes flick toward the oven where a small fire glows weakly. A voice calls from outside, a man's voice, older, rough from years of shouting in markets. You think you can bake like them now? The young man doesn't look up. I can try, he answers simply. A soft laugh follows. Rice is easier, cheaper. People here don't care about bread. The boy presses the dough firmly, his jaw tightening. Some do. The older man doesn't reply, just snorts dismissively before walking away. The young man exhales slowly, his focus never breaking. He shapes the dough into something roughly resembling a loaf, lopsided, a little uneven, but you can see the determination behind it. He sets it aside on a wooden tray, covering it gently with cloth as if tucking in a child. Some historians still argue about when the first Vietnamese bakers truly started making bread for themselves rather than just for the French. But standing here, watching this boy in his tiny shop, you feel like you're seeing it happen. Not in grand bakeries or markets, but in quiet, stubborn moments like this. He moves to the oven, crouching to feed it more wood. The fire flares briefly, painting his face in warm orange light. His eyes reflected, bright, hopeful, maybe even a little scared. He checks one of the loaves already baking, pulling it out carefully with a wooden paddle. It's not perfect, the crust is too pale, the shape uneven, but he taps it lightly with his knuckles anyway. The soft, hollow sound makes him smile, just a little. He places it on the table, letting it crackle in the cooler air. The sound fills the small shop, sharp and comforting, like applause in an empty theater. For a long moment, he just stares at it, his hands resting on the edge of the table. Then, quietly, almost to himself, he says, "Better than yesterday." You can't help smiling, even though he doesn't know you're there, because in this quiet shop, with its cracked walls and tiny oven, he's not just baking bread, he's baking the beginning of something bigger. The rain whispers against the roof as you step back into the mist, leaving him with his loaves and his determination. And as you walk away, you can still hear the faint crackle of bread cooling, like it's cheering him on. Morning creeps in slowly, sliding soft golden light across the damp street. You're already there, standing just outside the young baker's shop, watching as the mist begins to lift. The air carries that faint, warm scent, the kind that wraps around you like an old blanket. It's different this time, richer somehow, layered with roasted wheat and something almost sweet. Inside, the young man moves quickly, his hands no longer hesitant. The shop is busier now, not crowded, but busy enough that you notice two women sitting cross-legged near the doorway, their conical hats resting on their knees. They whisper to each other, pretending not to be curious, but their eyes keep darting toward the table where several loaves are lined up, cooling. The crusts are better today, darker, with fine cracks running across the tops, like tiny rivers. You catch yourself staring too, as if you could taste them just by looking. The young man glances up, meeting the women's eyes briefly before focusing back on his work. He doesn't say much, just moves with the kind of quiet urgency that comes when someone is too focused to notice anything else. Finally, he slices a loaf, the knife making a soft, satisfying crunch as it breaks through the crust. Steel rolls upward, carrying that smell, and one of the women sighs, loudly enough to be embarrassing. He doesn't react. He just sets a few slices on a small plate and pushes it toward them. Try, he says simply. The women exchange looks, almost like they're deciding whether this is worth the risk. Bread, after all, isn't cheap, not for them. But one finally picks up a slice, holding it delicately between her fingers like it might shatter. She takes a bite, chews slowly. Her expression doesn't change at first, and you wonder if she hates it. But then she takes another bite, faster this time, and nods just once, an approving nod that feels louder than any words. The other woman follows, tearing into her slice almost greedily. For a second, it's quiet except for the crunch of crust and soft hums of surprise. A man passing by stops, drawn in by the smell, his curiosity obvious. "What is that?" he asks, almost accusingly, as if this small shop has broken some unspoken rule. "Bread," the young man answers. The passerby wrinkles his nose. "That French stuff, it'll never fill you up like rice does." But he doesn't move on. He just stands there, watching the women eat, his skepticism fighting with his interest. You can almost see the moment curiosity wins. He steps inside, crossing his arms. The young baker doesn't argue, doesn't try to convince him. He just offers another slice, wordless. The man takes it, hesitates, then bites. His eyebrows rise a fraction, like he doesn't want to admit he likes it. It's soft. The young man shrugs as if to say, of course it is, but his lips twitch into the tiniest smile. And you realize, standing there in the doorway, that this is how change begins. Not with grand speeches or revolutions, but with small bites taken in quiet rooms. Some historians still argue whether the local acceptance of French bread started because of taste, necessity, or sheer curiosity. But watching this moment unfold, you can feel it. It started with a single loaf that was good enough to make people forget, just for a second, what they were used to. The young baker wipes his hands on his apron, looking at his loaves with something close to pride. He doesn't celebrate, doesn't cheer. But when no one is looking, you catch him touching the crust of one loaf gently, like you might touch the shoulder of an old friend. Outside, the sun pushes higher, and the mist thins. The smell of bread drifts out into the street, curling around corners, sneaking into noses, pulling people closer without them even realizing it. You stay a little longer, leaning against the doorframe, because you can feel something shifting. Small, quiet, but undeniable. And somehow, you know the city will never smell quite the same again. The sun has climbed higher now, though it barely pierces the lingering gray clouds. The streets glisten, puddles shrinking as the warmth creeps in, releasing that distinct post-rain scent, wet soil mixed with smoke from breakfast fires. But as you wander toward the edge of the market district, a new smell cuts through the morning air. Burnt wheat, sharp, bitter, unmistakable. You follow it instinctively, turning into a wider alley where a crowd has gathered, red voices buzzing louder than the usual morning chatter. And then you see it, a bakery, or what's left of one. Thick black smoke curls from the roof, staining the pale morning sky. The walls, once patched with mismatched bricks, are streaked with soot, and the wooden shutters hang crooked, charred at the edges. A group of men toss buckets of water toward the still smoking oven, steam hissing as it rises. The smell of burned bread hangs heavy, filling your nose with that acrid, almost metallic tang. Somewhere in the mess, you catch glimpses of blackened loaves scattered across the ground, cracked open like charcoal stones. A woman stands nearby, clutching a child to her hip, shaking her head. "All that flour," she murmurs, voice tinged with pity. "Gone." A man beside her snorts, not unkindly. "Better than burning rice." But even he keeps staring at the ruined loaves, his expression oddly thoughtful. Closer to the bakery, you see the young baker, the same one from last night. His face smeared with soot, his hair sticking to his forehead in damp clumps. His apron is scorched at the edges, and his hands, covered in ash, shake slightly as he crouches near the door. He picks up one of the burnt loaves, turning it over in his hands as if hoping it might still be edible. The crust flakes off in brittle black shards, and he drops it back to the ground with a sigh. The French baker you recognize from before stands a few steps away, arms crossed, muttering something under his breath in French. Sharp words, critical though not cruel. His eyes keep darting to the oven, as if blaming it for betraying him. The young baker doesn't answer. He just keeps staring at the smoking oven, his jaw tight. A boy from the crowd steps forward, bold enough to speak. Can you still sell the ones that aren't burned too much? The young man doesn't look up, but he shakes his head. No. His voice is flat, tired. Another voice pipes up from the crowd. I'd still eat them. Better than nothing. A few others murmur agreement, but no one steps closer. Some historians still argue whether early Vietnamese bakers faced more failures than successes, whether their mistakes slowed the spread of bread. But standing here, watching the scene, you realize that failure wasn't the end. It was just part of learning. The young baker finally stands, wiping his hands on his scorched apron. He glances at the ruined loaves again, then at the French baker, who gives him a long look. There's no lecture, no scolding, just a brief nod, small but firm, before the older man turns and leaves, muttering something you can't quite catch. The young man takes a deep breath, then looks toward the oven again. His hands flex almost unconsciously, like he's already thinking about starting over. The crowd begins to disperse, their curiosity sated. A few people glance back, whispering to each other. One woman shakes her head but says quietly, almost to herself, "He'll try again. He has to." You take one last look at the blackened loaves lying scattered across the ground. They're ugly, ruined, but even in failure, they smell faintly of what they could have been. The young baker crouches again, picking up a cracked loaf, holding it for a long moment before setting it carefully aside, as if even failure deserves respect. The smoke still curls into the air, fading slowly, but you can feel it already. Tomorrow, the oven will burn again, and maybe, just maybe, the bread will be better. As you turn to leave, the smell of burnt crust clings to your clothes, sharp and bitter, but beneath it lingers something softer. The promise of fresh loaves yet to come. Smoke from the burned bakery still lingers faintly in the damp morning air as you make your way toward the edge of the district where the French barracks stand. The streets here are wider, cleaner, buildings sturdier, built for people who don't have to worry about leaky roofs or cracked walls. And that's when you hear it. Laughter, loud and carefree, echoing across the courtyard. You follow the sound to a shaded area where a group of lay down. French Foreign Legion soldiers are sprawled on wooden crates and overturned barrels, eating. A basket of bread sits open between them, loaves stacked like ammunition. The soldiers tear into them with little ceremony, biting straight through the thick crusts, crumbs scattering onto their uniforms. Their laughter mixes with the sharp crack of breaking bread, and the smell of fresh loaves drifts toward you, rich and tempting even in this rough setting. One soldier, tall and sunburned, holds up his loaf like a trophy. "At least we still have this," he says, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Another snorts, tearing a piece of bread and dipping it into a tin cup of watered-down stew. "If I have to eat rice one more day, I'll throw myself into the river." Bursts into laughter, though it's the kind of laughter that hides a deeper homesickness. You watch quietly from the edge of the courtyard as a younger soldier takes a bite and chews thoughtfully. "Not the same," he mutters. "Back home, the crust was softer. Butter. God, I miss butter." "Shut up," another soldier teases, smacking him lightly on the shoulder. "Better than eating boiled fish every day." But you notice the way his eyes linger on the loaf in his hands almost tenderly, as if the simple piece of bread is the only thing keeping him tethered to home. One soldier, his face tanned and lined from too many long days under the sun, sighs loudly. "You know what I dream about? Soup. Thick soup with bread soaking in it, not this dry stuff. Then go home." Someone jokes, but the laughter that follows feels softer this time, almost wistful. The young soldier looks at his loaf again, rubbing his thumb across the crust. "Still," he says quietly, almost to himself, "it tastes like home." The others fall silent for a moment, as if they all agree but don't want to say it out loud. Some historians still debate whether the French military's demand for bread in colonies was about necessity or just comfort for the soldiers. But standing here, watching these men gnaw on crusts like they're sacred, you know the truth. It's both. A few of them exchange pieces of bread, trading like children, joking about which loaf is harder, which one might crack a tooth first. One man laughs so hard he nearly spills his stew, catching it just in time. And then you see something unexpected. A Vietnamese boy, maybe 12, sits on the edge of the courtyard, clearly a helper or errand runner. His eyes follow the basket of bread with quiet longing, though he doesn't move closer. One of the soldiers notices him, hesitates for a second, then tears his loaf in half and tosses it over. Here, kid. The boy catches it awkwardly, clutching it like treasure. He bites immediately, not caring about the crumbs sticking to his chin. His eyes widen as he chews, and for a moment he forgets to even thank the soldier. The men laugh again, softer this time, watching the boy eat. The young soldier, the one who misses butter, smiles faintly, leaning back against his crate. Maybe they'll like it too one day, he says quietly. The others shrug, unconcerned, already back to their jokes. But you keep watching the boy, because his small smile feels like a tiny spark, one that might spread farther than anyone here expects. The soldiers continue eating, their laughter echoing against the walls, but you leave the courtyard with that image in your head. A Vietnamese boy sitting cross-legged on wet stone, chewing bread like it's the best thing he's ever tasted. And as you walk away, the crackle of crusts and the low hum of soldiers' voices follow you, carried softly by the damp breeze. The air feels warmer now, the mist lifting slowly as the late morning sun fights its way through pale clouds. The streets buzz softly with movement, vendors opening their stalls, children darting between puddles, and the distant clatter of carts rolling over uneven stones. But beneath it all, you catch a new sound, coins clinking, voices murmuring about prices. You follow the hum of trade to a busy crossroad where merchants argue loudly over vegetables and dried fish. Yet tucked into one corner, barely noticeable among the stalls, stands a small group of men talking in low, urgent tones. Their hands move as fast as their words, gesturing toward a stack of burlap sacks in the back of a wagon. You step closer, pretending to examine a basket of herbs while you listen. Flour is cheaper this week, one of the merchants says, his voice hushed but excited. The last shipment, good quality, not half-eaten by rats for once. Another nods, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. If it stays cheap, maybe we sell to the locals too, not just the French. A third man snorts, skeptical. Locals won't pay for wheat when rice is everywhere. Maybe they will, the first insists. People are curious. I've seen them buy loaves at the market, even stale ones. The skeptical man frowns, clearly unconvinced, but you notice how his eyes linger on the sacks, calculating. Some historians still debate whether lower flour prices or sheer curiosity pushed bread into Vietnamese markets faster. But here, watching this quiet argument, you can feel it. It's both. Money and curiosity, walking hand in hand. The merchants continue talking, tossing numbers back and forth. One of them glances toward the street, lowering his voice. If we mix just a little rice flour, stretch it more, it's cheaper to bake. Softer too. Maybe the locals will like that better. You almost laugh to yourself. A simple suggestion, but one that feels like the first thread of a much larger tapestry. Vietnamese bread evolving right in front of you, not out of respect for French tradition, but because of practicality. The men finally nod to each other, reaching a quiet agreement. Coins change hands, and the sacks are pulled off the wagon, stacked neatly beside the stall. Not far away, a young woman carrying a baby pauses to watch. Her gaze lingers on the sacks, curious before she moves on. But you can see it in her expression. She's wondering too. The merchants begin dividing the flour, measuring it carefully into smaller sacks. One mutters, almost to himself, if it stays this cheap, even the poor might try it. The words hang in the air, heavier than he realizes. Because you know what that means. Bread won't stay a luxury forever. A breeze drifts through the crossroad, carrying the faint smell of drying herbs and damp earth. But now, mixed in with it, you catch something lighter. Hope. Not loud or obvious, just the quiet kind that comes with the sound of coins clinking and hands shaking on a new deal. You step back into the moving crowd, letting the merchants fade behind you, but the thought sticks. Cheaper flour, softer bread, more hands holding loaves, and somewhere in your mind, you can already hear it, the quiet crackle of crusts in more and more homes, spreading through the city one bite at a time. The sun climbs higher, casting sharp streaks of light across the wet cobblestones. The market is louder now, buzzing with the usual chaos, vendors shouting, chickens squawking, children laughing as they weave through the crowd. But through the noise you catch something unusual, almost hidden under the regular rhythm of the morning, the faint smell of cooked meat mingling with bread. You follow Follow it through the maze of stalls until you find a small corner where a woman sits cross-legged on a low stool, her bamboo basket propped open beside her. Inside, nestled among old pieces of newspaper, are loaves of bread, slightly uneven, some with small cracks in the crust, but undeniably fresh. But that's not what makes you stop. The woman is carefully stuffing pieces of boiled pork into a sliced loaf, her fingers moving quickly, almost nervously, as if she's afraid someone might scold her for it. The meat looks simple, plain, pale slices of pork, still glistening with a thin layer of cooled broth. She adds nothing else, no sauce, no herbs, just presses the loaf together clumsily before handing it to a man crouched nearby. He takes it cautiously as though it might fall apart at any second, then bites into it. The crust cracks, crumbs sprinkling onto his lap, and his face twists, part surprise, part amusement. It's strange. He says after swallowing, the bread is too hard, the meat falls out. The woman shrugs, brushing her hands on her apron. But it's faster than soup. No bowl, no spoon, just eat. The man nods slowly, taking another bite. His chewing is awkward, but he doesn't stop. The child sitting nearby watches with wide eyes. "Can I have one?" he whispers, tugging at his mother's sleeve. The woman selling bread glances at him, hesitates, then pulls another loaf from her basket. She slices it unevenly, stuffs in a few scraps of pork, and hands it over with a small smile. The boy bites eagerly, his cheeks puffing as he chews. He doesn't even mind when a piece of pork slips out, but catching it quickly with his fingers before shoving it back into the loaf. A few other people nearby begin to notice. One woman tilts her head, whispering to her friend, "So you can eat it while walking? No need for chopsticks." The bread seller nods quickly. "Cheap too. Half a loaf, just a few coins." The friend raises an eyebrow, curious now. "Give me one," she says finally, pulling coins from her sleeve. Some historians still argue about when the first true banh mi kep was born, whether it started with fancy fillings or simple scraps of meat. But standing here, you can feel it. This is the seed. No sauces, no pickled vegetables, no herbs. Just practicality. Bread that could hold meat and be eaten anywhere. The crowd thickens as more people stop to watch, curiosity spreading faster than the smell. The bread seller works quickly, tearing loaves, stuffing them clumsily with meat, wrapping them in scraps of paper. The line isn't long, but it grows steadily, one curious person at a time. A man chewing loudly laughs as he speaks to the seller. The French wouldn't eat it like this. The woman grins, almost proudly. Good, it's not for them. The sun glints off the wet stones as you step back, letting the small crowd fill the space. You catch one last glance of the boy, his hands greasy, his face lit with pure delight as he devours his makeshift sandwich, and you realize that today in this noisy corner of the market, bread has taken one more step away from being just foreign food. It's becoming something else, something quick, cheap, and most importantly, theirs. You leave the market with the sound of crust cracking and laughter following you, mixing with the bright chatter of morning, and for the first time you imagine a future where the smell of meat and warm bread might fill every street. The sun sits high now, warming the wet cobblestones until they glisten like polished stone. The streets hum with late morning energy, vendors shouting, clattering bowls, the rhythmic creak of wooden carts. But something different draws you onward, a soft buzz of voices, lighter and almost excited. You follow it until you emerge onto a broad, open street lined with tall colonial buildings. And there, standing proudly under the shadow of the Nahabten Fold, the Grand City Theater is a small stall. Its bamboo roof sags slightly under the weight of the sun, but the table beneath it is neat, organized, almost proud. Loaves of bread sit in rows, their crusts catching the light, golden and crisp. Beside them, wrapped in banana leaves, are slices of cold pork, some bits of cucumber, and even a small bowl of pickled vegetables. But what catches your attention most isn't the food, it's the line. People are waiting. Vietnamese laborers in plain shirts, a few French officers still in dusty uniforms, even a young woman wearing a clean, pressed-out tie, her parasol shading her face. They stand together, not separated as usual, watching the vendor assemble each loaf with surprising speed. The vendor, a wiry man with quick hands and a warm grin, slices a loaf neatly, stuffs in pork, a few cucumber slices, then adds just a hint of pickled vegetables before wrapping it in old newspaper and handing it off. A French officer near the front of the line takes his loaf first, inspecting it with a skeptical frown. Not how we eat it back home, he mutters in French to no one in particular. The vendor just smiles politely. Good for walking, he says in broken French, gesturing at the busy street. The officer shrugs, takes a bite anyway, and his expression softens immediately. He chews slowly, then takes another bite, this one larger. Behind him, a Vietnamese laborer steps forward eagerly, exchanging coins for his own loaf. He doesn't hesitate. He bites into it right there, the crust cracking loudly. He grins around, the mouthful of bread turning to the friend behind him. Better than carrying rice bowls. The friend laughs, already fishing for coins. The young woman with the parasol accepts her loaf delicately, as if she's still unsure this is proper for someone dressed so finely. But then she takes a small bite, her eyes widening slightly in pleasant surprise. She hides her smile behind the loaf, pretending to remain composed, but her second bite is bigger. Some historians still debate whether this kind of public mixing, French and Vietnamese eating side by side, was rare or more common than we think. But here, standing on this busy street, you can see it. Food breaking a line that language and politics couldn't. The vendor works quickly, his hands moving with practiced rhythm. Slice, stuff, wrap, hand off. Each transaction ends with a small smile, sometimes a laugh, and always that crackle of fresh bread being bitten into immediately. A little boy, too small to reach the table, tugs at his mother's ao dai. Can we eat like them? He asks, pointing at the officer chewing happily beside a laborer. The mother hesitates, glancing at the coins in her hand, then nods. One loaf, she says softly to the vendor. The boy takes his first bite before she even finishes paying, sauce dripping onto his chin as he chews with obvious delight. The French officer notices, smirking slightly. Good, isn't it? He says in clumsy Vietnamese, and the boy nods enthusiastically. The vendor glances up briefly, his grin widening just for a second before he goes back to work. The air hums with quiet contentment as more people gather, drawn by the smell, by the sight of others enjoying something quick, warm, and strangely unifying. You step back slowly, letting the line grow, the soft sound of crusts cracking, echoing against the theater's grand walls. And as you turn to leave, you can't help smiling, because here, in the shadow of Saigon's most elegant building, something simple and humble is quietly stealing the show. The sun has started its slow descent, softening the sharp edges of the city with a warm amber glow. The air feels heavier now, carrying the smell of damp earth, distant cooking fires, and somewhere, faint but distinct, the warm, yeasty scent of bread. But as you move farther from the busy streets and into the quieter, low-lying areas near the canals, the mood changes. The voices are softer here, the air cooler, and the smell of bread carries differently, less of indulgence, more of survival. You follow the sound of splashing water until you reach a narrow wooden bridge crossing a murky canal. Beyond it, a cluster of makeshift huts stands on stilts, their walls patched with bamboo and tin. The ground here is muddy, still slick from the earlier rain, and people move slower, their faces tired, their steps cautious. And that's when you see them. A family huddled under a small roof made from woven palm leaves, sitting on a raised plank of wood. The water below sloshes lazily against the stilts, carrying bits of debris and the faint smell of river weed. The family is small, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Their clothes are damp and stained, and a thin layer of mud streaks the edges of the wooden platform where they sit. The father holds something in his hands, wrapped carefully in what looks like old newspaper. He unfolds it slowly, revealing a half loaf of bread. The crust is dull, softened by the humidity, but to them, it's treasure. The mother tears it gently, giving each child a small piece before taking one for herself. The boy bites first, his teeth sinking into the soft interior, and though the bread is clearly old, his face lights up as if it were fresh from the oven. The girl nibbles carefully, holding her piece with both hands like it might vanish if she lets go. The father waits until they've eaten before taking his own bite. His jaw works slowly, his eyes distant, like he's calculating how many more days they can manage with just this. Better than nothing, the mother says softly as if trying to convince herself. The father nods, though his eyes flick toward the empty canal bank where their rice baskets should be. Some historians still argue about whether bread truly became a food for the poor this early, or if it remained a luxury for much longer. But sitting here, Watching this family share a stale loaf, you know it didn't matter how fresh or fancy it was. When rice failed, bread filled the gap, however imperfectly. The boy licks his fingers, catching crumbs, and looks up at his father. "Will we have more tomorrow?" he asks quietly. The father doesn't answer right away. Instead, he rips the smallest piece from his own portion and hands it to the boy, forcing a smile. "Maybe," he says finally. The mother glances at him, her eyes saying what her mouth doesn't. "We'll find a way." The canal water laps gently against the stilts, rocking the platform slightly. The family sits in silence, chewing slowly, savoring every bite like it's a full meal. Then you realize, standing there quietly, that for this family, bread isn't some foreign novelty or a curiosity anymore. It's survival. As you step back into the fading light, you take one last look at them. The boy licking the last crumbs from his hands, the mother carefully folding the empty newspaper as if it still holds something valuable, and the father staring at the loaf's crust like he's memorizing it. The sun dips lower, painting the water gold, and you walk away with a quiet understanding that sometimes food doesn't need to be perfect to matter. It just needs to be there. The sun leans low in the sky now, turning the clouds into soft streaks of orange and pink. The city hums with that particular energy of late afternoon. Vendors calling out last prices, children darting barefoot through puddles, and somewhere far off, the low hum of a boat engine churning through a canal. You follow the familiar smell, warm bread mixed with faint charcoal smoke until you reach a narrow street tucked between two rows of old houses. There, a new stall has appeared, and unlike the makeshift bread baskets scattered around the city, this one is different. A wooden sign hangs crookedly above the doorway, handwritten in chalk. Banh mi, Nong Jian. Fresh bread. It's not French handwriting. It's not French at all. The stall itself is simple. Wooden counters, a clay oven built against the back wall, smoke curling lazily into the evening sky. But what makes you stop isn't the oven or the smell. It's the people. Vietnamese. Only Vietnamese. The baker is a middle-aged man, his hair streaked with gray, his hands moving with quiet confidence as he pulls loaves from the oven. His sleeves are rolled high, revealing arms dusted with flour. Beside him, a teenage boy, maybe his son, fans the fire, the orange glow painting his face with determination. The loaves on the table look different too, lighter. The crusts thinner than the thick, jaw-breaking ones the French bake. When the baker sets a new loaf down, you hear it crack softly, not as loud or hard, but delicate, like thin ice breaking. A woman waiting in line tilts her head, inspecting the bread carefully. "Why is it softer?" she asks. The baker wipes his hands on his apron, smiling faintly. "Less wheat, more rice flour, cheaper, easier to chew." The woman nods approvingly. "Good. My mother can't bite the hard ones." The boy fans the oven harder, sending a small burst of sparks upward. The baker pulls another loaf out, setting it carefully on the table. The steam rises quickly, carrying a smell that's familiar but new at the same time. Warm, inviting, less intimidating than the sharp, dense scent of French baguettes. Some historians still debate when exactly Vietnamese bakers started experimenting with rice flour to make bread lighter and cheaper. But standing here, watching these loaves, you can feel the shift happening. Practicality, shaping tradition. The first customer, an old man with a conical hat, buys a loaf and taps it gently with his knuckles. The crust gives a soft, hollow sound, and he smiles, almost surprised. "Not bad," he mutters, tearing off a piece. He chews slowly, then nods. "Better than those stone-hard ones." The line grows longer, neighbors whispering to each other as they wait. The mother with two children clutches her coins tightly, glancing at the oven with quiet hope. When it's her turn, she buys a loaf, handing it immediately to her children. They tear into it with the kind of delight only children have, crumbs sticking to their faces as they giggle. The baker watches them, his tired face softening into a quiet smile. You step a little closer, watching as he shapes more dough, his hands moving steadily without hesitation. This isn't imitation anymore. He isn't trying to bake like the French. He's making something different, something for his own people. A man in line leans closer, whispering to the person next to him, "Maybe this is better than rice some days." The other laughs. "Careful, or the rice sellers will hate you." But even as they laugh, they keep waiting, their eyes following every loaf that comes out of the oven. The sun dips lower, painting the street in soft orange light. The The smell of warm bread drifts farther now, carried by the evening breeze. And as you step back to let more people through, you can feel it, the quiet birth of something new. Something that doesn't belong to France anymore. It belongs here. You turn to leave, glancing one last time at the stall. The boy catches your eye briefly, his face glowing with pride as he fans the fire harder, ready for the next batch. And as you walk away, the soft crackle of thin crust follows you, like a whisper promising that by tomorrow, more people will be standing in that line. The evening light spills gold across the streets now, long shadows stretching from the wooden stalls and tiled rooftops. The air cools slightly, carrying the mixed scents of grilled fish, steaming rice, and that familiar warmth of fresh bread drifting gently through the alleys. You follow the sound of small, quick footsteps, light, rhythmic, almost like a skipping melody, until you reach a narrow lane lined with houses, and there, weaving through the street with surprising agility, is a child no older than 10, balancing a wooden tray strapped to his shoulders with two thin ropes. The tray is filled with bread. The boy moves fast, calling out in a clear, sing-song voice that rises and falls like a market hawker's chant. Bun me nong day, nong John day. The words tumble out of his mouth, cheerful and practiced, making heads turn as he passes. His bare feet slap lightly against the damp stones, leaving tiny splashes in the shallow puddles. A group of children playing nearby stop to stare, some whispering to each other. He's selling bread, like rice cakes. The boy doesn't slow down, weaving expertly between carts and baskets, his chant growing louder as he turns the corner. People step aside automatically, some smiling at his energy. He stops suddenly in front of a woman carrying a basket of vegetables. Fresh bread, Chioi. It's still warm. The woman raises an eyebrow, shot half amused. Bread for dinner. My husband will laugh. The boy grins, showing a missing tooth. Make him try first. No bowl, no spoon, just eat with your hands. The woman hesitates, then laughs, handing over a few coins. The boy quickly wraps a loaf in old newspaper and hands it to her, his movements quick and confident. A man sitting nearby at a low stool watches curiously. You're not too young to work this hard, he asks, biting into a sugarcane stalk. The boy shrugs, still smiling. I run faster than the older sellers, and faster means warmer bread. Some historians still debate whether bread truly became street food this early, or if it stayed confined to bakeries and stalls for much longer. But here, watching this boy dash down the street with his tray bouncing against his back, you can feel it. Bread is starting to move, to travel, to meet people where they are. The boy darts toward a group of workers resting outside a small workshop. Bun me nong day, he calls again, louder this time. One of the workers, wiping sweat from his forehead, waves him over. How much for one? The boy gives the price quickly, his tone almost daring them to argue. The worker exchanges a glance with his friends, then hands over the coins. The boy passes him a loaf, still warm, and the worker tears it apart, sharing pieces with his friends. They eat quietly, chewing thoughtfully, nodding at each other as if admitting, yes, it's good, cheaper than I thought. One of them mutters, easier than cooking rice after work. Another adds. The boy grins, already moving on, his chant echoing down the lane. Bun me nong day, nong John day. The sound follows you as you watch him disappear into the maze of streets, his voice fading into the growing hum of evening life. You smile to yourself because in that clear, cheerful chant, you can hear more than just a sale. It's the sound of bread weaving itself into daily life. One street, one voice, one warm loaf at a time. The sun has nearly dipped below the rooftops now, painting the sky in streaks of pink and violet. Lanterns flicker to life along the narrow alleys, their warm glow shimmering in puddles scattered across the stone streets. The city is settling into evening, yet the smell of bread, soft, warm, and inviting, lingers stubbornly, almost louder than the scent of rice or grilled fish. You follow the smell into a tight, winding hem where the air feels closer, heavier, filled with the quiet hum of families returning home. Laundry drips gently from lines above, sending cool droplets onto your shoulders as you pass. And then you feel it before you see it. The air, thick with heat and steam, curling out of an open doorway. You peek inside. The hem narrows here, and the room you're looking into isn't a bakery or even a stall. It's just a tiny kitchen attached to a home, but the smell of fresh bread fills it completely. Loaves rest on a wooden board near the window, still glowing faintly in the lamplight. And inside, a family sits cross-legged around a low table. The father, his hands still streaked with soot from his work as a blacksmith, tears a loaf open. Steam escapes, curling into the dim light, carrying that rich, yeasty smell that wraps itself around you like a blanket. The children lean closer, their noses twitching as they watch him. The mother laughs softly, tapping their hands away as she slices the loaf neatly. But you notice something else, something new. The bread isn't being eaten plain tonight. On the table sits a small clay bowl filled with something green and bright. Fresh herbs, their sharp, clean scent cutting through the heavier smell of bread. Beside it, a small dish of pickled vegetables glistens in vinegar, and a spoonful of chili sauce sits ready, its deep red, almost glowing in the lamplight. The mother moves quickly, her hands practiced as she adds the herbs and pickles into the bread, pressing the halves together before handing it to the youngest child. The boy takes a bite, his teeth crunching through the thin crust, and his face lights up instantly. It's spicy. He squeals, giggling, but he takes another bite anyway. The older sister leans forward eagerly. I want one too. The mother laughs again, handing her the next sandwich. The father bites into his own, his jaw working slowly, his eyes closing briefly as he chews. This, he says finally, his voice soft but certain, tastes better than rice tonight. The mother smirks. Don't say that too loud or our neighbors will think we've lost our minds. But even as she teases, she takes a bite herself, her face softening with quiet satisfaction. Some historians still argue when exactly herbs and pickled vegetables became part of the Vietnamese way of eating bread, shaping what would eventually become banh mi as we know it. But here, in this tiny, smoky kitchen, you're watching it happen. Not out of luxury, but out of instinct, of making food taste like home. The little boy licks chili sauce off his fingers, grinning, and the girl chews happily, crumbs dusting her lap. The father takes another bite, nodding slightly as if committing the flavor to memory. This is ours now, he says, almost to himself. The mother doesn't answer, just tears another loaf open, her hands moving faster now, making sure everyone has one. You step back into the cool evening air, leaving them to their meal. But as you walk down the narrow hymn, the smell of fresh bread and pickled vegetables follows you, weaving itself into the hum of dinner fires and quiet laughter. Then you realize with a small smile that tonight, in this little home tucked deep in a Saigon alley, bread isn't just something borrowed anymore. It's becoming something entirely new. The sky is deepening into that soft indigo of early night, lanterns glowing brighter as the streets take on a quieter hum. The air feels cooler now, carrying the mixed scents of dinner, grilled fish, simmering soups, and somewhere ahead a richer, more tempting aroma, bread, warm and buttery, mingled with the smoky sweetness of cooked meat. You follow it into a wide courtyard near the barracks where a group of French soldiers lounges lazily, ants like their laughter echoing off the stone walls. But they're not the only ones here. A small food stall sits just a few paces away, its table lit by a single flickering oil lamp. The vendor, a wiry Vietnamese man with quick hands and a sly smile, slices open a loaf with a practiced motion. The bread is thinner than the stiff French baguettes, its crust golden and delicate, cracking softly under the knife. What makes you stop isn't the bread, though. It's what he's putting inside. Neatly arranged on the table are slices of chalua, Vietnamese pork sausage, pale and smooth, its edges glistening under the lamplight. Next to it, sprigs of fresh cilantro and a small bowl of chili salt sit ready. The vendor stuffs the sausage into the bread, sprinkles a bit of the salt, then hands it to a French officer waiting patiently. The officer eyes it curiously, raising an eyebrow. This isn't how we eat it in France, he mutters in clumsy Vietnamese, and the vendor just grins. Better this way, he says, pushing the loaf toward him. The officer hesitates, then takes a bite. The bread cracks softly, the sausage peeking out as he chews slowly, thoughtfully. His eyes widen slightly. Not bad, he says finally, a hint of surprise in his voice. He takes another bite, bigger this time, nodding approvingly. Actually, very good. A few other soldiers nearby laugh, curious now. One steps closer, pulling coins from his pocket. Give me one too, he says, his French accent thick. The vendor works quickly, slicing bread, stuffing it with sausage and herbs. Within minutes, several of the soldiers are chewing, their voices quieter as they focus on eating rather than talking. One of them leans back against a crate, wiping crumbs from his chin. I didn't think bread and what do you call this? Chalua, the vendor supplies. Right, that. I didn't think it would work together. The vendor smiles knowingly. Told you better this way. Some historians still argue whether French approval encouraged the Vietnamese to experiment further, or whether the locals simply didn't care what the French thought. But watching this now, you can see how funny it is. French officers eating Vietnamese-style bread with the same quiet delight as the locals. The young Vietnamese boy watching nearby giggles, whispering to his friend, even they like it. The friend grins. Maybe soon it won't be their bread anymore. The soldiers keep eating, crumbs scattering onto their uniforms, their laughter softer now, replaced by quiet murmurs of satisfaction. One soldier, finishing his last bite, nods at the vendor. You should sell this in France. He jokes and the vendor laughs, shaking his head. The boy watching beside you whispers again, his tone proud this time. No need, it's ours. You smile at that, stepping back as the smell of warm bread and sausage drifts into the night, carried by the soft evening breeze. Because tonight, under the flickering oil lamp and the curious eyes of soldiers, you can feel the shift solidify. Bread isn't being eaten with Vietnamese flavors anymore. It's becoming something new, something even the French can't deny tastes better than they expected. The night is settled fully now. The streets wrapped in a soft hush broken only by distant laughter and the faint creak of wooden shutters in the evening breeze. Lanterns glow like little stars along the alleys, casting trembling reflections on rain-darkened stones. The air carries a new smell tonight. Not just bread, not just meat, but a blend of something sharper, brighter, more alive. You follow it, weaving through the alleys until you reach a small gathering under a wide tamarind tree. The tree's thick branches stretch like dark arms across the sky, its leaves whispering in the night breeze. Beneath it, a vendor has set up a makeshift table covered with old cloth, and around him, a curious crowd lingers, watching closely. The vendor is young, his hair tied back loosely, his sleeves rolled up, as he works with the intensity of someone who knows he's doing something new. On his table, laid out neatly, are small jars, pickled carrots and daikon shining in faint brine, thin slices of cucumber, sprigs of cilantro, and a tiny clay bowl of chili salt. Beside him sits a basket of warm bread, its crusts golden, thin, and delicate. The kind baked with rice flour, kind that cracks softly at the slightest pressure. A woman in the crowd crosses her arms skeptically. Bread is for meat, she says flatly. The vendor doesn't look up, just smiles faintly as he slices a loaf open, steam curling into the cool air. Try this, he replies. He works quickly, layering pickled vegetables inside, their bright orange and white stripes glowing in the lamplight. He tucks in cucumber slices, sprinkles a touch of chili salt, and finally presses the bread closed with a satisfying crunch. The woman shakes her head but accepts the loaf anyway. She bites cautiously, her face unreadable at first, until her eyes widen just slightly. The man beside her leans closer. Well, she chews slowly, then takes another bite bigger this time. Crisp, sour, spicy, not bad, she admits, trying to sound unimpressed even as she keeps eating. The vendor smirks, handing another finished loaf to a waiting man who tears into it without hesitation. His chewing is loud, his grin wider with every bite. Better than just meat, he says between mouthfuls. Some historians still argue when exactly pickled vegetables became a staple in Vietnamese-style bread, whether it was born out of necessity or taste. But watching this small crowd tonight, you know the answer. It's because it works. A boy standing at the edge of the group whispers to his friend, "It's like salad in bread." His friend wrinkles his nose. That's strange. But when the vendor hands them a loaf to share, they grab it eagerly, biting at opposite ends of their laughter, muffled by crunchy crust and crisp vegetables. A French man passing by stops, drawn by the smell, and raises an eyebrow at the sight. "What is this?" he asks in broken Vietnamese. The vendor shrugs casually. "Bread." Away. The French man tilts his head, intrigued, then buys one. He chews thoughtfully, the crowd watching as he eats. Finally, he nods, almost reluctantly, before walking off with the loaf still in hand. The woman who first doubted takes her last bite, wiping crumbs from her lips. Strange at first, she says to no one in particular, but I want another. The vendor smiles quietly, already slicing his hands moving faster now as more people step forward, curious and hungry. You step back into the night, letting the line grow, the smell of pickled vegetables and warm bread swirling together in the cool air. And as you leave, the soft crunch of people biting into their loaves follows you down the alley. A new sound, louder now, more confident, echoing softly under the tamarind tree. The moon has climbed high now, silver light spilling over rooftops and pooling in the quiet alleys. The city feels slower, softer, as if even the usual night sounds are pausing to listen to something new. The faint breeze carries a mingled scent, warm bread, tangy pickled vegetables, and the smoky sweetness of grilled meat curling lazily through the dark streets. You follow it to a narrow, lamp-lit corner where a small crowd has gathered, not rowdy but expectant, their murmurs blending with the occasional soft crackle of fire. At the center of it all is a woman, maybe in her 30s, her hair tied back neatly, her sleeves rolled high as she tends to a simple charcoal grill. Thin slices of marinated pork sizzle against the heat, releasing a smell so rich and inviting that people shuffle closer without even realizing it. Beside her, a basket of loaves rests under a cloth to keep them warm. These are not the stiff, towering baguettes the French still cling to. These are shorter, softer, their rice flour crusts glistening under the lamplight. The woman moves with quiet confidence, pulling pork from the grill, its edges caramelized and glistening, and placing it onto a plate lined with banana leaves. She glances up, meeting the expectant eyes of her customers, and smiles. "Wait," she says simply, her hands already slicing a loaf open. She works quickly, tucking the pork inside, layering pickled carrots and daikon, a few cucumber slices, and sprigs of cilantro. Finally, with a practiced motion, she drizzles a bit of her homemade sauce, dark, glossy, and smelling faintly of garlic and sweet soy. The first customer, a young man in a worn work shirt, takes the loaf, his eyes wide as if holding something far more expensive than a street snack. He bites into it, the crust cracking softly, juices dripping slightly down his hand. He doesn't speak right away. He just chews, slower than usual, savoring every bite. Finally, he exhales, grinning. This is better than rice tonight." The woman smirks, already handing another finished loaf to the next person in line. Some historians still debate when grilled meat became a signature part of Vietnamese-style bread, transforming it into the hearty street food it's known for today. But standing here, watching this scene under the quiet glow of lanterns, you can feel it happening, each bite sealing the change. A child in line tugs at his mother's ao dai, whispering eagerly, "Will it taste like home food?" The mother crouches, smiling as she smooths his hair. "Better. It's like home food you can carry." The crowd grows as the smell spreads, drawing more curious faces. A man in a conical hat leans over to another, muttering, "Who has time to sit and eat rice after work? This you can eat while walking." The other nods, biting into his loaf, his eyes closing briefly in quiet approval. Even a French passerby, drawn in by the smell, hesitates before stepping closer. He watches for a long moment, clearly unsure, then buys one. The woman hands it to him without fuss, and he bites cautiously. His expression softens almost instantly. He chews thoughtfully, then nods politely. "Bon, très bon," he says, his accent thick. The woman just smiles, already grilling another batch of pork. The moonlight glints off the thin layer of oil on the bread's crust, making it look almost golden. You take a slow step back, letting the crowd press closer, their murmurs rising into soft, contented chatter. And as you turn to leave, the sound of bites, chews, soft sighs of satisfaction follows you into the quiet night. Here, under a flickering street lamp in the silver watch of the moon, Banh Mi has taken one more step toward becoming not just food, but a way of life. The night deepens, the city wrapped in a hush that feels almost tender. The moon hangs low, scattering silver light across the wet cobblestones. Most market stalls have closed, their tarps tied down against the breeze, but here and there, the quiet is broken by the occasional call of a late-night vendor or the soft rattle of a passing cart. And then you hear it, low laughter, warm and unhurried, mingling with a faint, irresistible smell. You follow it to a small corner near a crossroads where a single oil lamp flickers gently against the dark. A family sits cross-legged around a low wooden table set right outside their house. The glow of the lamp softens their faces, and the steam rising from their meal curls like pale ribbons into the cool night air. The table is simple, a plate of sliced grilled pork, a bowl of bright pickled vegetables, a dish of chili salt, and at the center, a basket of bread. Not just any bread. These are soft, short loaves with thin, crackling crusts, each one glowing faintly in the lamplight. The mother reaches for one, slicing it open with a small knife. The crack is soft, delicate, and the steam drifts upward, carrying that warm, comforting scent. She works quickly, stuffing the bread with pork, pickled carrots, and cucumber slices, then handing it to the father, who takes it with a grin. The children sit eagerly, waiting their turn. Glance her, their eyes bright with excitement. The mother makes another, handing it to her daughter. Then another for the youngest boy, who practically bounces as he takes it. The father takes his first bite, the crust giving way easily under his teeth. He chews slowly, nodding to himself as if confirming some secret he's been keeping. This, he says quietly, tastes like us now. The mother glances at him, smiling faintly before taking a bite of her own. Not French anymore, she agrees. The little boy speaks with his mouth full, his voice muffled but excited. It's like eating a whole meal in one bite. His sister giggles, nodding, crumbs dusting her lap. Some historians still debate exactly when banh mi stopped being seen as foreign and truly became part of Vietnamese identity. But here in this quiet street under the soft glow of a single lamp, you know the answer. It's happening right now, loaf by loaf, meal by meal, family by family. The father tears off another bite, his face softening as he chews. Easier than rice, he says after a moment. Faster. But it still feels like home. The mother adds more pickled vegetables to her sandwich, her hands moving confidently, as if she's been doing this for years instead of just weeks. The children laugh between bites, trading pieces of pork and cucumber, their joy filling the quiet street. A neighbor passing by slows, sniffing the air curiously, then steps closer. "What are you eating?" she asks. The mother smiles, lifting her half-eaten loaf. "Dinner. Want one?" The neighbor hesitates for only a second before nodding. "If it smells this good, yes." The father reaches for another loaf, slicing it open, his hands steady and sure, like he's been doing this his whole life. You step back into the shadows, letting them eat, their laughter and quiet conversation blending into the soft hum of the night. As you turn to leave, the breeze carries the smell with you. Warm bread, smoky pork, and tangy pickled vegetables. It clings to the air, familiar and comforting like the scent of a home-cooked meal that's always been here. Because now, under this quiet Saigon sky, banh mi isn't just borrowed anymore, it's Vietnamese, entirely, proudly, and forever. The night settles fully now, a velvet quiet draped over the city. The moon glows softly above, its silver light sling across the rooftops, catching in the puddles that still glimmer faintly from the day's rain. Saigon hums gently in its sleep. Distant murmurs from late-night conversations, the soft splash of oars in a nearby canal, the occasional bark of a restless dog. And yet, even in this stillness, the smell of bread lingers. Warm, toasty, mingled with the faint tang of pickled vegetables and the smoky whisper of grilled meat. It drifts lazily through the air, weaving between shuttered windows and sleeping alleys, as if reminding the city of something it now carries in its heart. You find yourself back on a familiar street, the same one where you first followed the scent weeks ago. But it's different tonight. The silence here isn't empty. It's full, layered with the quiet rhythm of change. A single stall remains open under the soft glow of a lantern, its light flickering against the worn wood. The baker, the young man you watched grow from hesitant apprentice to confident hands, sits beside his oven, pulling the last loaves of the day from its warm belly. He sets them gently on the table, their thin crusts crackling softly in the cool night air. Steam curls upward, glowing briefly in the lantern's light before fading into the dark. A woman steps forward, her ao-ba-ba-ba sleeves rolled loosely, her face tired from the day's work but softened by a quiet smile. "Still warm?" she asks. The baker nods, handing her a loaf. She takes it, holding it close to her chest like something precious, and you can see it in her eyes. This isn't just food anymore, it's comfort. Two children, barefoot and sleepy-eyed, approach the stall, tugging gently at each other's sleeves. The baker kneels slightly, handing them a half loaf each. They clutch it with both hands, biting carefully, crumbs sticking to their lips as they grin. The mother who bought the loaf turns, watching her children eat. She shakes her head with a soft laugh. Rice will be jealous, she murmurs, half joking, half serious. The baker just smiles, a quiet pride settling in his tired eyes. Some historians still argue whether it was the price, the taste, or sheer convenience that made banh mi part of daily life. But standing here tonight, you know the truth. It's because people made it theirs. They bent it, filled it, softened it, spiced it until every bite tasted like home. The street grows quieter as the last customers leave, loaves tucked under their arms, smiles lingering on their faces. The baker stacks his trays, wiping the table slowly, methodically, like a man who knows he'll do it all again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. You step back, letting the shadows swallow you as the lantern flickers one last time, its light soft against the walls. The breeze carries the smell of fresh bread past you, lighter now, more familiar, like it belongs here. Not as a visitor, not as a foreigner, but as part of the city's own breath. The baker closes his stall, sliding the wooden shutters into place. The oven's glow fades slowly, embers crackling softly like a quiet applause. You take one last breath, letting the scent fill your chest. The sound of the city softens around you, footsteps fading, voices quieting, a gentle sigh of Saigon settling into sleep. And as you turn to leave, the thought drifts through you, soft and certain. This journey, this long, creaking path of flour sacks, burned loaves, stubborn hands, and hungry smiles, has led to something simple and perfect. A loaf of bread born far away, now beating with the pulse of Saigon. The moonlight catches the last wisp of steam curling from the cooling loaves, as if sealing the moment in silver. And in the quiet of this warm night, you feel it deeply. The story is complete. The bread has found its home. End of script. Sweet dreams.